So we're just waiting for Keith to appear and we will start.
Chair. So I have a number of questions, but I think they fall into four areas. So the first one is with reference to the thoughts and advice from the quality panel. So it's starting on page, or the reference starts at page 181. And it talks about, towards the bottom of the page, it says, the gridded elevator, so I'm talking about the design of the blocks, which I question whether they are desirable in the location. So, because I think that they could appear very overbearing, and I'm not sure whether the gridded structure is entirely aesthetically appealing. So the quality panel at the bottom of page 181 says, the gridded elevational aesthetic is elegant, but more urban than suburban. And later on, they say on page 182, at the bottom of that section in the middle of the page, it says the panel had concerns with the block on the southwest corner. I think this is block A, because the approach from the west displays the girth of this L-shaped block. It's out of scale with the other components. And further up that paragraph, it says that the panel had supported the idea of pavilions, but the southwest corner is a large block, not a pavilion. And elsewhere in page 151, when we've got the comments and responses, if I may, where is it? Sorry, so it's just the question that the grid work, sorry, I'll come back to that in a moment, that the grid work on the top floor adds to an overbearing style. And I just wondered whether it was possible to reconsider that design of the grid work. Not all of it, but the very top floor, the grid work on the top floor. So the other one was, there was a comment about the Undercroft parking, and it said, could it be made more attractive? And it wasn't clear to me whether that meant the outside appearance of it, or whether it meant whether it could be made more attractive to go into and park in. So that was a sort of clarification. And the other one on page 151 was, there's an interesting comment about PV panels, the second block up from the bottom of the page, where it says PV panels should not be readily efficient, and the use of flat roofs with the PV panel layout expected to ensure the panels are efficient. And I want to know what that, I suspect the narrative has been recorded not quite as it was intended, and so it would be useful to know what that meant. Secondly, I wanted to check, there appears to me to be only one vehicular access for 100 dwellings, and because there is, as far as I can see, no vehicular access through Horse Chestnut Avenue, and the path beside the Premier Inn is just for pedestrians and bicycles. I note that the highways have not offered any objection, but I just wondered if one vehicular access for 100 dwellings is acceptable. The third thing I would like to suggest or ask about is, when prospective purchasers are looking at the site, would they be shown naturally and automatically the proposals for the whole site of Storiesfield? Because only in one of the diagrams that Guy Wilson showed us, which was the very first one of his slides where it showed the principles in layout, does it show that there's actually a development due to happen south, roughly speaking, on his plans, of the area on the east side of the plan? In other words, they might think they're buying a property that's going to overlook a field, but actually there's a whole series of development planned opposite that right-hand end of the triangle. And the fourth thing was the distance to bins. And I just wanted to understand, does that include people having to walk 70 metres to take, for example, large bits of cardboard if they wanted to dispose of them, like I would in a blue bin, or indeed any garden waste? You know, how would they literally have to walk 70 metres to get to it? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so I counted 6 questions there. Who's going to? Yeah. Okay, you do 2.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I'd just take the opportunity to come in first before I hand over to Guy, but there's a couple of points I'd like to address specifically, please, Councillor Bradnam. Your first point about looking again at the design of the blocks, I think I just want to exercise a bit of caution to members of this committee that unless there is a sound material planning reason as to why you're of the view that this southwest part of the scheme should be revised, mindful that this has been through a very prolonged period of application discussion with urban design officers, planning officers of the Shared Planning Service, none of whom have raised objections or concerns in design terms or long views, visual impact concerns. So I just wanted to make the point that there would have to be sound reason as to why you would expect us to revisit that element of the scheme. And the other point I wanted to make was about prospective purchasers of properties. Would they be seeing the whole site? Well, it would be an expectation that the buyer's own legal searches would pick up the planning history of adjacent sites. So whilst we can't control the seller's details that they promote their site with, the legal searches that the buyers would have to undertake would pick up the planning history of the adjacent plots to which they would be buying.
So, firstly, I quite take your point about the appearance. My planning reasons would be the appearance of this particular large block from the south, which is, I think this is intended, part of it is intended to be an open space, and the appearance of that block from the outside, but also the view of the intended residents from the inside out will be interrupted by brick columns. So it's just whether that's a desirable option, and so it's appearance and massing is what I'm concerned about, and it's under massing that the quality panel gave their view. The second point is about prospective purchasers. It's not about historic planning applications, it's about what might come forward afterwards. And on Guy's first slide, when he had the recommendations, the faded out background showed a whole tranche of development on it's not the east side, but it was the right-hand side of the diagrammatic, which showed a whole load of development. And it's just the fact that people need to see what it is they're buying in the context of what is planned in that area as well.
It's not a matter for this planning application. There are large diagrams of the master plan all over Eddington. It is up to the buyers to do their research and their legal advisors to advise them on what they're buying into. Can I just return back to this grid and this reference and the quality panel's reference to the using the brick monolithically? And if we just ask Guy to bring back the slide which showed the evolution of these 4-storey blocks. There was one, the pre-app. There was the one that we saw at the presentation and the one that we've got in front of us now. Not quite. Well, That's it. That's it. And is that the
Chair,
west?
that is the view from the west. If you go on one, Guy,
This,
it shows the view from that one, shows the view you would see from Stories
Yeah.
Field, the part of it which is intended to remain open as a grassed area. And my question was, what is the value of having that very top layer of gridding on the top? Obviously, the building setback is a black surface finish, which kind of hides itself, whereas this makes the building more prominent than it needs to be. It's the same apparently on Block B, which you can see further down the view. But
the solution would be to infill that top, those top blocks, would make it
well, no,
much softer.
it's a roof terrace there. So my suggestion would be simply to take off that pavilion. I'm sorry, I know what Philippa Kelly is saying, but my preference would be not to have that 3 window frames of red brick on the very top of the building. It would just be to let people have a roof terrace with a fence around it, but not have those big monolithic window frames right on top of the building. But that's a personal view.
To just comment on that, because you've obviously been involved in the whole evolution of this design.
The reason I asked that, Chair, is because I think they've been taken off in response to our earlier comments on the other parts of that same block, which in that diagram are shown in cream and a further red brick to the right-hand side. Do you see that one only has 3 by 3? Whereas this one on the left side, which is the southwest corner, has 4 by 3.
In other words, change is possible.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to,
Oh, you're okay.
yeah, thanks. So just to, yes, to address that point. So, yeah, the sort of design of this block, so Block A particularly, has evolved quite a lot through the pre-application process and also through discussions with the quality panel and so on. So the sort of rigid grid design, sort of the intention behind that is to provide sort of a kind of a strong kind of frontage to the building, given that it's going to be quite visible in sort of longer distance views across Stories Field. So, so it's considered important to provide kind of quite a visible, add a bit of presence to the building, and that's sort of in those sort of longer distance views. But then by having that sort of empty, that sort of void on the top floor, when you're sort of close to the building, you'll see sort of daylight through it, so it'll reduce the sort of the massing from that kind of that closer up sort of view. So reduce the sort of scale of the building. So it provides kind of a sort of dynamic kind of appearance to the building, and so those depending on sort of whether you're close by or sort of long distance, and that's something which officers are supportive of. So it's something the urban design officer. Their supportive design. The specific points around the quality panel, I think, so the design has evolved slightly since they reviewed the proposals. So in particular, if I just go back to this slide, they were concerned about the sort of view looking at the site from the west. So that's when you're going along the access road towards the site. And you can see how it's been sort of evolved, changed slightly to sort of give greater consideration of those views. That's sort of western side of the building, and sort of to address their concerns around that. And I think, again, sort of go back to the point about sort of how sort of urban and suburban. I think Eddington is a sort of, I guess, a relatively urban development sort of centre is, and there's an idea of providing sort of a bit of a transition through this site from this block kind of facing sort of Stories Field, then sort of more suburban sort of character to the development edge. So that's why this sort of grid, this sort of kind of rigid grid is used on that sort of storage field elevation, but then isn't really used sort of further into the site. Hope that sort of clarifies that kind of point.
Right.
And
That, sorry, that elevation from the west overlooks the green belt. It's the green belt that the cars drive over between Eddington Avenue and this development. So I take the point that Eddington is more urban than perhaps elsewhere, but that, you know, there is still an element of suburbanness about it, and it just seems that this is quite.
just looking at that view, you can see how the latest version has softened the rather brutal, confrontational frame grid pattern of the second diagram elevation. And it would be so much better if that softening was continued onto that remaining elevation that will face the open space. Because that will be really, it's just such a brutal, confrontational change from the rather natural grassland and character of the area to that form. And it's trying to be something that this area isn't. It's just completely out of character.
When I say so, Chair, I believe the other blocks, B and C, have the same grid work on the left-hand side of them.
This one is the one that you'll see in perpetuity. Okay.
Do you want to continue with the other questions? So just to this point about just around in terms of the practicality of the that sort of balcony area. So I think the brick enclosure provides sort of a bit of enclosure to that space, so which improves sort of the usability of that terrace as well as is an advantage of the design. Just to move on to the other kind of sort of questions. So in relation to the quality panels point about the undercroft parking, how the design has been approached has been to essentially adopt the same design to the windows above, to the sort of openings provide ventilation to the undercroft. So you can see that at the bottom of this image. So essentially where you've got sort of openings for ventilation, they sort of mirror the design of window openings above, which obviously considers a successful sort of approach to that element. Just a point about the photovoltaic panels on page 151, that's a sort of project, that's a typo. It's meant to read that the photovoltaic panels should not be readily visible. That reads as there'll be sort of a parapet to each of the buildings, which will sort of hide those panels. Just in relation to access, I'll just share a different screen quickly.
Page 158, paragraph 20.2, it refers to.
So this shows the sort of the one of the parameter plans for the site. You can see, apologies, I can't use the red points from this image, but I'll just zoom in a bit. So you can see the secondary street along where the cursor is here, and as part of future phases, there will be some further secondary streets linking south, which will then link back into the primary street network, and then onto Madingley Road in the south. So yeah, so just the initial access is proposed as part of this application, but as future phases will include sort of further vehicle access sort of linkages.
Sorry, could Guy just show us on that display with the cursor where ooh. Sorry, jinxed it. Oh, there we are. Could you just show us where this site is on that plan?
Yeah, so it's the grey sort of triangle. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Ooh.
I think the internet's been a bit flaky these last few days, hasn't it?
Yeah, so it's the triangle where I think you can see, yeah, where the cursor is. Sorry.
Yes, okay, there, right. Sorry, so the question is, will there be other accesses, vehicular accesses for this development?
Yeah,
From Madingley Road as well.
so the purple lines here, sort of dotted lines, they show the sort of secondary streets. So you've got the one being delivered as part of this proposal just to the south, along the southern edge of that triangle. And then you can see there'll be further secondary streets heading south and then linking back into sort of the main road network.
So in due course, will there be an access across Horse Chestnut Avenue then?
Yes, there will. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so the other point was on sort of bins. So the underground bins points, they provide sort of recycling and sort of general waste disposal. I think green waste have to be sort of separate. I don't believe that. I think so. I think that would be sort of there's a sort of a site-wide kind of sort of system in place for sort of communal areas and so on. And so if any individual houses who want a green waste bin, that's something they'll have to get sort of a separate green waste bin.
Okay, Councillor Stobart, please.
Thank you, Chair. So my questions were really about infrastructure, but also briefly about trees. I think we discussed earlier rapid charging. So the consequential thought, given that we will be carrying loads typified by rapid EV charging, is a move towards three-phase across the whole site. Customarily, we've used single-phase for housing in this country, but elsewhere, three-phase is not uncommon. So it may be something that we would want to put on our long-term agenda, perhaps not for this development, but later on. In regard to carbon accounting, there are several avenues we could explore. One is this development up for an assessment of embedded carbon, given that we are at this relatively early stage, and what are the kind of benchmarks that we could use or establish? So that's perhaps a question of the developer. Do we have the notion of targets for embedded carbon in developments such as this? I just wanted to dwell briefly on the district heating scheme and its relation to individual owners' experience. I think it's well established within Eddington already, but in this development, what is the nature of the interaction between an individual resident or a family in a dwelling and the district heating scheme? Of course, district heating, as as the carbon mix of our electricity supply is still dominated by natural gas, offers actually quite a lot of advantages. But what would be the development path for district heating in the context of this development? So that's a question. Now a comment about the tree strategy, maybe a small question afterwards. The tree strategy seems to be very well worked out, and from the point of view of the feel of the development, the existence of mature trees already is great. And they do have quite significant effect on local temperatures. So as an overheating control, trees are good, although we could never, in a sense, engineer trees to do some kind of cooling. But I wonder if we've used the full potential of trees, mature trees, in both the design sense and a way of controlling the overheating or the temperature of the spaces between buildings, which where trees would be particularly effective. And then just one question for the developer representative who spoke. You spoke of design-led as opposed to engineering-led in respect to some of the features of this development. I was just interested to dwell on that for a moment, if you could unpick it a little bit, as there seemed to be a useful philosophy in play. So, Chair, that, sorry, is a series of comments and questions. I hope that makes sense.
So my understanding is that this scheme will be part of the district heating scheme, which is managed by a company called Core. The district heating system is currently entirely gas-fired, but the university is obviously exploring how it will get off gas. It's quite an important feature of this whole development. I think amongst all of that, it's the question around design-led streets, which is one I think can be answered now. And the rest are ones that are takeaways. Thank you. So we'd have a comment on the design-led streets. Please, Guy.
Sorry, could you repeat that question, sorry?
Sorry. It was what did that really mean, design-led as opposed to engineering-led? Design-led was being talked about as advantageous. So I just wanted to unpick that. There was something in there that I didn't quite get from the comment.
Yeah, so I think, I guess, that's partly a question for the developer, but in terms of the sort of approach we've taken, because these streets aren't going to be adopted. So we've taken sort of the approach is to kind of look at them perhaps more holistically than would be with sort of adopted streets. So looking at how they work as spaces, sort of both kind of walking and cycling and integrating planting and sort of size features. I think has been sort of the approach we've taken really. Alongside obviously looking at sort of making sure they kind of function from a servicing point of view and also sort of safe for all users as well.
Actually, how I see it is that these streets have been made to do a lot more work than what you do is just doing a straight engineering job. So we've got segregated cycle pedestrians, we've got SUDs, we've got landscaping, we've got features. It's a lot more than just the straight engineering. That's the design-led bit. Okay. And that's a crucial part of the placemaking, what makes Eddington such a special place. Okay.
Good.
Matt.
Just very briefly, I completely agree. It's kind of function and design held together rather than just simply delivering something to a very simple kind of functional requirement. So yes, I do understand it and fully support it. Maybe I challenge the use of the terminology, but no, stated that way, it's quite clear. Thank you.
Councillor Fane, please.
Thank you, Chair. two questions, if I may. One very brief. When Guy was referring to mechanical ventilation, I just wondered whether that was mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. I'm very glad to see the passive cooling that had been incorporated. Following on from the previous questions, particularly by Councillor Bradnam, in relation to the design and the concerns of the panel about the more urban than suburban, I'm very conscious of Philip Kelly's warning that we must relate this to specific planning considerations. Now, this outline for this was granted in 2013. Inevitably, a lot has changed since then. In particular, the developments in the NPPF. And the NPPF 2021, of course, incorporated the provisions on beauty, always difficult to define, but paragraphs 126 and 128 I was referring to in particular. And I'm just wondering to what extent the designs, and I'm not thinking just of the blocks where we saw the sort of evolution of the design, but also I'm looking here at the development edge housing elevations for, you have type D, part of that, and it's difficult to read. I can't see which elevation is which, because the scale, but two-storey blank elevations there, and type F, some three-storey blank elevations. And I'm just wondering to what extent planning officers are satisfied that the provisions of the NPPF, to the extent they're applicable, given the timing, have been applied. And I refer to those two particular paragraphs.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fane. Guy, do you want to show us those elevations, please, that Councillor Fane's referring to?
So with regards to the point about ventilation, so I believe the overheating analysis assumes sort of essentially primarily sort of naturally vented ventilation for the apartments, but I believe they will be fitted with mechanical ventilation. I believe that will be MHRV, but I'm not entirely certain on that point. Apologies. In terms of the sort of design, I've got the you can see the design of those two house types you mentioned. So I think sort of design is a tricky one. It's very, I guess, it's quite subjective. Particularly something such as beauty, which is referred to in the updated NPPF. But we've been through very extensive pre-application discussions since I think it was October 2020. We started, and sort of design has been of the house types and the wider site layout has been through extensive discussions with our urban design officer and landscape officer, as well as the quality panel, and officers are satisfied that the site represents a very high quality design and sort of meets the tests in both the outline permission and sort of the sort of policy context for it, as well as the NPPF as it is today.
Can you just tell us where we see these blank elevations?
So these would be, so I assume by blank elevations referring to the ones on the right-hand side there. So, yeah.
And the second from the left on the top row.
Yeah. So these houses will be along the sort of development edge. So if I go to the sort of site section, you can see. So I think the two-story one would be. So I'll just change the pointer. So those sort of two-story ones are, I think, where you've got sort of the terraces and also two-story houses there. Essentially, there'll be those elevations will be within those sort of rows of houses. I think there's quite a lot of detailed design elements within sort of design of houses. So you've got sort of brick banding courses at ground level. you've got sort of the setback elements, including sort of the garages and sort of the links between buildings, and also obviously integrated with all the sort of landscaping as well. So I think there'll be the views along the street will be pretty active and sort of interesting. And sort of those where you've got sort of areas of brick, those won't be particularly visible within the street scene.
Satisfied, Councillor Payne, that that's between the properties. Okay, so can I?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I have 3 questions. The first one is the shape of the plot is a bit peculiar. I'm curious about it. I don't know whether it would help if you brought up the zoomed out plan. I just noticed the southern boundary goes across the middle of a field. Is there any hidden boundary we're not aware of, a legal boundary at that southern edge? And is there any further expansion planned south of the plot? I think that Councillor Bradman was asking a similar question, basically. So that's my first question. My second one, completely different now, is the cycle stands. Do you have a ratio of cycle stands per resident or per building? So often you don't have enough cycle stands at these places. So I just want to make sure that that's being considered. And are those cycle stands covered? I would hope they are going to be. And my third question is, are these dwellings going to be available on the open market? My question, thank you very much. Thank you.
Just go back to the sort of the master plan slide, please.
If it works.
So just to show you, this is just the sort of initial illustrative sort of master plan for the site. So it's sort of old site, but it gives you a good idea of the sort of block structure. So lots M4 and 5, which we're looking at today, are sort of this sort of triangle area here. So you've got this sort of area of green space to the south, which is Stories Field, so yeah, the shape of the block is kind of it's really sort of to sort of frame that sort of space.
Excuse me, there look like some buildings on there that aren't on here. Am I just misreading my diagram? Sort of just
so
in this corner there.
Yeah.
What you're looking at is the master plan. We're just looking at this particular phase of a larger scheme. These developments that you can see on this slide are subsequent schemes that will come in front of this committee
In the future.
The area.
Will they be 6 or something?
I've got the floor. So the area of green, that is part of the master plan. And you'll see that there's a stretch of green going all the way through the development. And it includes, and if you just show us on the cursor guide, there's a site of special scientific interest in there as well.
Thank you. Okay, yeah.
So that explains the layout, what you're looking at in this particular context. Councillor Bradley, did you want?
Thank you. It would be really helpful to understand from Guy the section that Councillor Levine was pointing out, which is the section, I know it's not south, but south on this diagram. Is that likely to be M6, M7 on the master plan?
I'm not entirely sure what the naming convention is. It's for those plots. So I wanted to note, obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, is that the current outline permission has sort of run out in terms of sort of residential parcels. So, and also the university is looking at through sort of promoting the site for the local plan at kind of sort of potentially some densification of the site as well. So there's a bit of uncertainty about kind of exactly the form of future.
Sounds running, Guy. Can we just move on to cycle stand numbers and whether they're covered, please?
Yeah, so all of the residential cycle stands are covered. So I believe, I don't have an exact number, but there's more than, the ratio of cycle parking is just over one space per bed space, or per bedroom, sorry, and which is in accordance with the area action plan and the outline permission. And there's also sort of visitor cycle parking integrated into the development as well.
Chair, firstly, I'm a bit disappointed that 3 of the flatter blocks don't have lift access. I understand it's because there may not be many flats. I'd just be grateful if officers could confirm anyway. I think I'm right that we can't insist anyway, can we? Because it's a previous consent under the old local plan. Because obviously in future, I'd hope that we can make sure that we don't have a situation where we have flattered developments, because obviously someone can become disabled even if they buy it when they're not. Commend the long gardens, by the way. It is very nice to see some houses with decent-sized gardens, so I would like to note that. I note that we're losing 34% of the trees, but I think retaining most of the copse, I'm not entirely clear if it's all of the copse, but if you could just confirm. But I did mention this to Guy earlier in my questions, in terms of the amenity of those trees, some of which are old, as in valuable, are we looking at, well, can we strengthen the tree conditions to make sure we have semi-mature trees going in? Because my concern is the amenity won't be replaced for, could be decades if we don't do that. Could Guy just confirm, I think you mentioned that all of the development has mechanical ventilation, but obviously we do have some single aspects. So could you just confirm that that you are satisfied that they are suitably vented? And finally, just to pick up on, I think, various points, I also find the massing of those big blocks blocky, I suppose is the best word. But what I'm not quite clear about is what they're facing. Because obviously if we're building up against them on the other side of that road, I would have less of a problem. But I think from the picture that Guy just showed, the 3 big blocks are actually facing the park and not. So it would also be used to have indicative heights permitted in the outline plan for the 3, as Councillor Bradham described, the southern ones. Because I'm just trying to get my head round how this looks, because without having the rest of the master plan, when you're reading through, it's quite difficult to actually ascertain. But I do have some concerns why we've gone for those very, very big, tall blocks and the one bit that is actually facing the park, rather than the one bit that is facing other developments where we've seen perhaps in the one we looked at earlier this morning, BDW has quite a few tall buildings, but they're all facing each other, so it kind of makes quite an urban streetscape. Thank you.
Can you just deal with the tree strategy there and the ones that have been retained? I seem to remember reading that there was a condition survey, the ones in good condition have been retained, and your reflections on the question about introducing semi-mature trees.
Yeah, so the applicant's taken a tree survey of the copse, and so the idea is to sort of retain sort of the other trees where they're sort of in good health and so on. So it won't be the entirety of the copse; it'll just be part of it. In terms of tree planting, so one of the outline conditions requires submission of landscaping details, including detailed tree planting plans, which is the condition we're proposing not to approve as part of this application. Part of the reason for that is because we're looking to secure some more mature trees to be planted to address that concern, as you said. So, with regard to lift access, so the outline provision only requires compliance with code for the Lifestyle Homes standard, which this development is compliant with. And then in terms of ventilation, the apartments have been assessed under Part O, sort of assuming sort of being predominantly naturally ventilated. So mechanical ventilation will be fitted to the apartments. And I think that's building height, sorry. I'll just quickly share my screen again. So this is the outline building heights parameter plan. So the green triangle is the site, but also the extends into the red area below that. And that the sort of maximum building heights for the green area is 34 metres, and then 38.5 metres for the red area, and then sort of brown area below that has a maximum height of up to 40 metres, so it's potentially slightly taller, sort of a lot, future development on that side.
Jenny? Okay, sorry, yes. I just want to go back on the point about the grid brick at the third floor level. I think that actually in time when, in the hot weather, they're going to use, it's like a big pergola, and I suspect there's going to be canopies are going to be put up, and it will be much more interesting because you'll have something to fix your canopy to as well. And this has happened again in Trumpington, south facing across Hobson's Park. Loads of canopies because it's getting so hot. I think nobody's mentioned affordable homes. I suspect there is no affordable homes. That's because of the whole site, the earlier permission. There's a condition about construction ecology management plan, which I think is really good to see. But I've also, in the report, it says there are already hedgehogs on site. So and badgers. What we found on some schemes where they have to put hedgehog doorways in, where there is known hedgehog, they have put in all of the all of the fencing without the doorways, and then right at the end, before occupation, they go and cut the doorways through, and it's devastated, killed off the hedgehogs that are there. So when the fencing goes in, they need to put the hedgehog doorways in to support the hedgehogs. But I'm really pleased to see a construction ecology management plan. It's also good that it's still referring to lifetime homes. That's great, because actually the current Part M is doesn't go quite as far as lifetime homes, so it's good that we're still referring to that. I'm really disappointed about the single aspect housing and the fact that they've used the modelling to comply with overheating rather than bringing in design features. Again, the modelling is based on the data we're using now. We know it's getting hotter. The current modelling allows for something like three nights a year to be over the acceptable standard, but that's at current temperatures. As we get hotter, there's going to be, many more days of unacceptable temperature at night because they've used the modelling rather than design features to keep the space cool. Councillor Stobart asked about embedded carbon. I just wanted to, just as a matter of information, in the next local plan, schemes of over 100 homes will have to provide whole life carbon emissions calculations, but also circular economy statements about how to dismantle buildings later on, and we'll also have to provide performance and use. But that's the next one. Thank you.
Did you want any responses to any of those statements?
I think just the hedgehog doorways, I think. Thank you.
Well, can we make that an informative?
Can it be a condition, part of the landscape condition?
Okay. Can we be recorded as a landscape condition, please? Councillor Gawthrope-Wood, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to repeat something which I was very worried about. Single aspect dwellings still being designed in when they should be designed out. I wasn't too clear what this simplified overheating measure was. Also disappointed that we've still got blocks without a block without a lift for M42, so 15 dwellings aren't compliant. M43, I would like to see more than 5%, but there we are. Pleased to see that the lifetime homes was referenced, although I don't know the detail on that. This is a sort of general question that Eddington is meant to be achieving a very, very high standard of carbon reduction, or near to carbon zero, and innovation. And really, and to this level 5. Now, I'm not clear what the details of level 5 are, but should Eddington and all the developers be doing more there? Because they are what we will look to for other developments. I mean, we are Cambridge, and known as an area known for innovation. And then smaller questions. Solar, you have got solar PV on all the houses. I was a little bit confused by, I think, the statement in one of the tables. And bins, it did look to me as though on the inner road, maybe it is the loop road, there was one place where it looked as though there could be another underground bin, so people didn't have to walk so far to get rid of their refuse. So that's on the northwest side. And I also, it's really where we diverge from the design code, and is that a problem? I think we might have covered it pretty much, but thank you. Okay, I've got nothing else I wanted to pick up. No, that could do. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a comment there on this is not an ordinary site, right? So we've got underground bins. This isn't about having wheelie bins. Are we dragging bins on this site? I think it's all. No, there's no bins. So what we're talking about is walk distance to the underground bins. Is there any standard for that? Where does that sit?
So there's guidance in the design code on walking distances. So I think I can't remember, but essentially the guidance is that all dwellings should be within 50 metres of a bin. As I highlighted in my presentation, there's a couple of instances where a couple of houses are exceeding that walking distance up to, I think, 70 metres. I think that essentially it's a fact that the sort of the location of the underground bins is constrained by where they can be accessed by the refuse vehicle. So it's a bit of a design trade-off with sort of other elements.
So we have a resident present, and I just need to ask this question. This relates to, if you just get the drawing up, it relates to Block E, I think. You will know that there were third-party representations made from residents of Huntingdon Road, and they were concerned about the impact of three-storey dwellings backing onto Huntingdon Road overlooking, and the four-storey block E on the properties on Huntingdon Road, so overlooking an impact on character. That's it. So could you just explain, Guy, please, if like the back-to-back distances from that four-storey building to the nearest building on Huntingdon Road?
Yes. So the gardens, the sort of gardens of the existing properties on Huntingdon Road are, I believe, at least 40 metres deep. You've also got the 20-metre sort of buffer, so there'll be 60 metres between the existing houses and the proposed house along the development edge. Yeah. And then it'll be at least another 20 metres to Block E, so at least 80 metres in total.
Yeah, so it's an 18-metre back-to-back distance. Now, on some of our new developments, we have 15-metre back-to-back distances. So what would you regard an 80-metre back-to-back distance being, Guy?
But, sorry?
Well, would you be concerned at any overlooking from the top floor of the four-storey block?
I would not be not consider it's likely to have an impact on the neighbours in terms of any impact on sort of loss of privacy, really.
And there would be no would there be overshadowing?
It's not likely to result in any sort of meaningful overshadowing.
Okay, all right. So there's no case, let's say, is there any concern then that you have about overlooking of these properties on Huntington Road?
No.
Okay, thank you. So, are you all on questions? Councillor.
The access along the, within the Red Line plan, immediately north of the World Conservation Management Centre, there's a very narrow bit.
Can you explain that? So the university doesn't own that strip of land just there, so only that narrow bit. So that's why they're going through land ownership considerations. There'll be one way, a separate footway, and there's commentary about it in the report, and it seems to be a satisfactory solution to the site problem.
Will that be sufficient for 160 houses?
Well, highways say it will be, and it's a good traffic calming measure to have in place. It's not unusual to have restrictors in and around the city, so it should be all right. And it's at a point where there is one of the main cycle pedestrian routes goes from Histon Road right across Darwin Green, right through this site to the west side. So it's actually quite a good spot to have cars having to stop and think about that. Councillor Bradburn.
Thank you. And you did, Guy and yourself did point out earlier on when I asked about was one access sufficient for this size of development? And it was pointed out that in due course there will be other accesses to this development and the ones on either side of it. So I think because as it stands, as it just looks at the moment, it looks like a cul-de-sac. But I think in due course, when the phase to the east is developed, there will be a route that goes across Horse Chestnut Avenue. So there'll be a further access that way, won't there, as well?
Chair, thank you. So just following on from Councillor Khan's question, so that constrained route, that narrow single carriageway route, is that also carrying cycling and pedestrian traffic?
Yes, so it would be a sort of shared route for cyclists and vehicles, and there is a sort of separate pedestrian footpath as well.
Could I say that any kind of road narrowing is dangerous to cyclists? And I know there are probably other ways of kind of exiting and entering this site just over to the southwest, for example. But if that were the main route and would be the preferred route for people travelling between this part of the development and, say, the centre of Eddington, or going out towards West Cambridge, I'd say there's a danger there. Always when you narrow and you have mixed cycling and motorised users, then there's risk.
Yeah, we've just sorted out one of those problems in Windsor Road, actually. So you're dead right. Yeah, okay. Councillor Pora.
Thank you, Chair. I think the debate has informed my view, and I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on this yet. My biggest problem are the three big blocks, because they are facing, in effect, what's going to be the park. I think I'm right in saying, what is the park at the moment? If you look at, and I think I'd be really grateful if officers could explain a little more, because I noticed in the pack it says these have been designed to be consistent with other Eddington design. Personally, Eddington design doesn't really do it for me, but that's fine. I understand it's a personal thing. But for me, it's these big I mean, you can see them on my pack, which is not much use holding them up, but how we're justifying having those 3 big blocks in the one area that actually looks out onto the open space, which to me is kind of against what we normally do in developments. We might have a hard edge against a part, but it'll be consistent along the whole way. Here we've just got these 3, and I'm struggling with that at the moment. I'm not sure if it's enough, honestly, to vote against, but I'm uncomfortable, particularly as we don't know what the other parts are going to look like, but particularly as we know whatever happens, that will remain as open space. So I don't know if officers could talk a little bit more about how that fits in with the rest of Eddington, because obviously a lot of this was consented before most of us were, well, certainly before I was on this committee, and I'm sure probably a few others. Thank you.
Councillor Pura, I think the offending block is block A. And do you think they're all problematic?
Chair, I think, and I
So-
wanted clarification, because I think all of the blocks have that high 4-storey gridded appearance on the left side when you look at them.
So are you looking at the possibility of softening the design on the 4th floor? Are you saying you want the 4th floor removed? That's... Dick? No, right, looking at detail.
What I'm saying is, can the officers justify why, in urban design terms, that is acceptable
Well,
when it's obviously quite considerably more than the rest of the
We've
site?
already heard the officer's justification and we still don't get it. So I don't want to go around that loop again.
Well, I think it's more in the context of the rest of Eddington, because that's what I'm missing a bit. It's obviously we have seen the blocked master plan, but
Well, there's nothing like this anywhere else in Eddington.
well, that's what I'm asking, because
There
it does
isn't.
say in it says in the papers this has been designed to be consistent with other parts of Eddington.
It's not consistent, it's ugly.
So that's what I'm asking officers just to explain a little bit about why they think urban
Okay.
design haven't objected to it, because I'm not
Right.
noted that they haven't, which obviously is.
Yeah, okay, well, we'll give them another go at it. Councillor Bradman.
And somewhere, and I'm struggling to find it in the papers, it says that this development is outside the parameters that were given. It's, but on balance, it's acceptable. And that may be the case, but as Councillor Porrer is saying, it would be useful to understand it, because somewhere, I'm sure somebody who can search, it says that it's outside what's would be expected.
The quality panel said this is I made a remark. It's most out of character. So we're not alone in not liking this. Councillor Carr.
Well, since we seem to be expressing opinions on the design, I would prepare the contrary view to some of the opinions expressed. I actually rather like the design. I think it creates a feature of interest. I think the idea that this green area, maybe it's green belt, but it's surrounded by development on both sides. It's really a symbolic division between Girton and the city. And I rather feel that it is an asset to these buildings, to the context, rather than a hindrance. I rather like them, and I think it will create a feature of interest that you can see from the park area. So I would take the opposing view, and I agree with the council. I agree with the officers.
As Councillor Fain said, what is beauty? I mean, it's a subjective thing, but the government tried to codify it for us. So I think we do need a constructive response from the officers on this. If we're going to be able to vote on this with the unanimous support, I guess. So, Councillor Thornborough.
The thing is, Eddington, you may not like Eddington, a lot of people may not like Eddington, but it's actually very well detailed. When you're going round, when you close up, when you use the building, when you touch it, it's well detailed, and I think this will be well detailed. If these kind of grid it's a different location with a different place, then I think I might be questioning it as well. But I think they will be detailed. I think when people move in and you have plants and you have these canopies, I think it will be much better than the elevations, which are elevations are never true. And I like this, and I think it's going to work out well. I just worried about, my biggest concern is the blocks without lifts.
Dean?
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to take it away from the design of the buildings, you might be pleased to hear. Just back to bicycles again, I've just had a further thought.
We're past bicycles.
Have we gone past bicycles?
We're on this topic now. We're in the debate on this topic now, sorry.
Okay.
Chair, just for our, just so that we can pin our thoughts down to places in the text, it's actually in 1411 on page 146 where it says, it's talking about the houses along the development edge and then the houses along the park entrance. And it says, I think it's here, where it's considered, this is actually relating to the area behind, but I guess it applies to all of it. It says, whilst there's some exceedance of the design code guidance on story heights, houses along the development edge will comply with the design intent of the design code for such a suburban character to the development edge. That's right, because actually that's talking about houses. Whereas the paragraph above refers to block E. Height and massing of block E is considered acceptable.
Sorry, can I clarify this point? So just with regards to compliance with the design code and the parameter plans, blocks A, B and C are within both the design code and are in accordance with both the design code and the parameter plans with regard to their sort of height. I think the design code, the sort of to answer Councillor Porter's kind of point around the sort of the structure around Stories Field, it does look to have quite a sort of a strong frontage to around Stories Field with sort of taller blocks sort of stepping up to that frontage with then sort of development stepping down towards the development edge.
I think everybody's had their, if anybody can have a say on this, they've had their say. So I'm going to ask Philippa now. And after I think we've heard from her, I'm minded to move this to the vote.
Yeah. So obviously, as we've heard this afternoon, this scheme, as it's presented before us, has been the subject of very detailed officer dialogue and discussion, which does stem back for some time through the pre-application process, with significant design amendments being made during the course of those discussions in response to advice both from the Cambridgeshire Quality Panel and from the Urban Design Officer of the Shared Planning Service. We've heard this afternoon from the case officer that the design and the layout of this scheme is considered justified and NPPF compliant, recognising the ambitions of the NPPF to achieve, amongst other things, visually attractive places. It's also worth noting that the NPPF also supports the preparation of design code to assist with the achievement of high standards of design. And in this respect, the officer report has again confirmed that the scheme does generally accord to the general principles and the parameter plans for the wider area as set out in the approved design code for North West Cambridge. We have heard different views this afternoon in respect of design. Design is very much a subjective matter, but our position is one which reflects the positive engagement through the planning process to achieve a scheme which officers are of the view is acceptable in design terms and will generate some significant social, economic and environmental benefits. So I think to conclude, we are supportive of the officer recommendation, which is one of approval for this scheme.
Thank you. I think representatives of the developer, the university, present may have got the impression that we're critical of the scheme, but our focus has actually been on detail. When you look at the big picture, this has got to be one of the most progressive, sustainable schemes that this committee has had in front of us. Eddington itself is identified by the government as a placemaking exemplar, and this scheme builds on that exemplary start to see development exceeding Code Sustainable Homes Level 5, supporting sustainable modes of transport, delivering biodiversity net gain, incorporating sustainable water management, and achieving the emerging local plan consumption per person, water consumption per person of 80 litres a day, when the national average, I think, is about 140. We've had an application in front of us that didn't even include that estimate. And I think the one we have in front of us coming up will be 120 litres a day. And the fact that we do have an integrated water management system on the site and a heat network and all of the units of accommodation exceeding nationally described space standards, lifetime home standards. And what there's been, I think it is, if there's one flaw in it, then it has been the introduction of a limited number of single aspect dwellings. And I would urge the developer to go back and look at the modelling following the advice that Councillor Thornborough gave you. Each year now we are getting higher and higher temperatures in Cambridge, and it's going to be more than 3 days. So do dwell on that and consider whether those single aspect dwellings are going to be habitable in 40, 60, 80 years time. And also the fact that you've respected the amenity of the residents of Huntingdon Road with the Long Gardens, and the fact that there will be virtually, I don't believe there'll be much impact on the amenity of those residences at all. So this scheme has a lot to commend it. We've had a slight disagreement on one single aspect of the design, but it's not in front of us. There's not sufficient grounds to refusal of this planning application. So,
Can you just add in about the hedgehog doorway highway?
that was incorporated. Do not fret on that particular point. We will make sure that hedgehogs have good living conditions. Councillor Thorpe.
Is there any way that an informative or a condition could be put in on the lift that is missing from the 2 blocks? 3 blocks, sorry, 3 blocks.
We will leave that point to the developer's discretion. I'm now going to take it to the vote. So if we can just help read the recommendation, please, and then we'll
Certainly, thank you, Chair. So the recommendation is on page 169 of your agenda under paragraph 26. So I'm going to take the first part first, 26.1. So this is to approve the reserved matters application reference 220499 REM, subject to the conditions and informatives as set out in Appendix 1 of the report. And there is an additional condition relating to hedgehog doorways that has been sought this afternoon. And I believe an additional informative in relation to the soft landscaping in response to condition 10, which is not being approved today, to ensure that semi-mature trees are planted as part of that soft landscaping scheme. So that's the first part of that recommendation, Chair.
So can we vote on that now, please? Those in support? Unanimous.
Chair, and the second limb of the recommendation is to approve or not approve the part discharge of the outline planning conditions insofar as they relate to this particular parcel, in accordance with the table at the bottom of page 169 of your report. Thank you.
Hands up if you're supporting this. And that is unanimous too. So, thank you. The application's approved. And thank you very much, officers, for steering this application to its conclusion. And thank you for the presentation as well, and for your attendance this afternoon. Thank you very much, the team that's produced this application. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to have a 5-minute break. But I'll introduce it first. So we're on agenda item 6. This is 22/05018/REM and 22/05037/REM, land north of Cherry Hinton, Coldhams Lane, Cambridge. Could the principal planner please introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my name's Rebecca Ward and I'm the Principal Planner. I'm also supported on the call by John Finney, who's the Principal Highway Engineer from the County Council. I know he's been waiting around for a while, so it's appreciated. In terms of the site, Bellway Latimer submitted this reserve matters for the first residential homes to South Cambridgeshire District Council and Cambridge City Council due to it being a cross-boundary site. On the back of some officer advice, Pollard Thomas Edwards, who were the original design code writers, have been kept on for this phase and retained to ensure a holistic design approach has been taken. So in terms of the proposal, it's the reserve matters application for appearance, landscape, layout and scale of 351 residential units and associated infrastructure, along with the partial discharge of a number of outline planning conditions that they're required to include within each reserve matters. So in terms of amendment sheet and updates, an amendment sheet was, I think, sent around yesterday, and that just included an update from the Local Highways Authority removing their technical objections to the scheme. The second update I just wanted to provide was draft condition 17 in the back of the pack. I didn't specifically write the plots in the condition, so I've just added the cluster of plots that condition would relate to, and we'll kind of work through that when we get to finalising the conditions with the agent. The third update is in regards to condition 20, which is for overheating. So the condition 20 was on the outline planning permission, so it's not in the draft conditions in your pack. So the condition required any reserve matters application to be accompanied by a detailed overheating analysis, and the condition wording is just on the screen there. Details of overheating and the analysis was provided with the original application submission, but we've just made an error and not mentioned it directly in our report. And just to confirm, the houses have all been tested using the dynamic thermal modelling that is normally required in order to achieve Part O. And 94% of the units on the site will benefit from that dual aspect. So condition 20 can be included for the partial discharge of this phase, and that just needs to be added on to the recommendation at the end, so just to note that. In terms of key planning stages, so I'm going to just do a brief overview of the background just as quickly as I can, really. So outline planning was secured in 2020, and subsequently Bellway purchased a site, and we've been working through the design code and the Section 73 agreement, which was approved by members in August and September last year. We had the reserve matters for infrastructure, which came to JDCC last month, which was agreed, and we're just hopefully looking to formally send the decision notice out on that within the next week. And we've also been working on the play strategy, the public art strategy, and then we get to this important first residential phase, which was submitted to us back in November. So I won't go through all of the bullet points, but like I say, we approved the outline in 2020, and that was accompanied by a detailed Section 106 agreement and a set of parameter plans that have helped guide the development. The Section 73 applications included some variations, but really the Section 73, these will all be of benefit to the scheme. So we've got enhanced green links, some additional open space. We've got some of the new flexible mews and coach houses that were added, and the character areas were slightly reduced in the code from 6 down to 3. Then the design code was developed to reflect the principles of the National Design Guide. There was some clear set of criteria that we were looking at to ensure the development met. This includes everything being in walking distance, public spaces bringing people closer to nature, and the aim to reduce the car on the streets. Within the design code, I'll go on to it in a bit, the 2 character areas that relate to this reserve matters was for the village and the gateway areas. So this was the overall design code framework plan that kind of gives you an overview of the site when it will be developed. So we've got the local centre in the middle, the primary school in the centre, and the secondary school. In terms of phasing of the reserve matters, so the developer intends to split them into 8 different parcels, and a further 2 applications will come forward for the primary school and the secondary school. The residential area 3 for this reserve matters is just the purple area located in the southeast of the plan. And this is a site location plan that covers that this specific phase. This phase has a site area of about 3.3 hectares, and like I said, consists of 351 homes. And there's a varied range of housing types across it. It forms the eastern gateway into the site from the Airport Way and Cherry Hinton Road. And it covers the 2 character areas, being the village, which is a lower density neighbourhood to the southern aspect, and the gateway to the northern aspect, being slightly higher density than this. So the plan in the top left-hand corner, you can see the 2 defined areas. So in terms of the proposed landscape master plan, so nature has been incorporated into each aspect of the design following the living infrastructure concept that was developed through the design code. And through this, we've created habitat, sustainable drainage and tree planting, which I'll go on to talk about in a bit more detail. There are neighbourhood parks that are located in the centre, combining the spaces and activities, and the design of the streets prioritises active travel, with some build-outs being located across the streets, raised tables to really create and reinforce a low-speed network. In terms of drainage, this is just looking at the flip side of the road, but in terms of drainage, the scheme is in accordance with the site-wide strategy. There are no big attenuation areas within this phase, but the areas are connected to the larger attenuation areas that were approved in the infrastructure application. So in terms of sustainability, the driveways will be permeable, there'll be pocket parks with rain gardens, and there'll also be some street swales as well. In terms of the overall tree strategy, so the street trees will largely comprise variety of indigenous and non-native trees, following the principles of the chosen tree in the right place. So the ones circled in red will be the semi-mature trees, and these will be the more focal points. So they'll be much larger trees and provide some shading and coverage and the visual amenity from probably the day that they're put in. The blue and the green will be slightly smaller, but still advanced nursery stock, and they'll obviously continue to establish over time. We've also got a climbing plant strategy on this site. It was something that come through from the quality panel. So you can see on the bottom plan where climbing plants will be introduced to create some, to break up some of the massing of the buildings and to add some interest as well. In terms of cycling, so cycle parking for residents have been thoughtfully located on the development to promote bike use, and locations chosen to be more convenient than the car. As part of the approach, every house will have a lockable cycle store and or a stand directly next to the entrance. So where garages are provided, they are enlarged to provide convenient parking, so you can fit a car and bikes in the same space. In terms of the apartments, cycle parking is located within the footprints of the buildings and near the entrance points. And yeah, we've kind of accommodated more widely spaced stands to allow for the use of the cargo bikes as well. So on this slide here, you can see in purple, if you can kind of see the little purple squares on the plan, they're the areas where there'll be front of plot parking, cycle parking. So there's some examples in the bottom left with how they look. So we're very much wanting to integrate the structures into the street scene, but so they're there and easily accessible, but yeah, they still kind of visually look okay. And these will accommodate probably up to 2 bikes. I've got an example of one of the plots where there'll kind of be a couple of the plots where there'll be split cycle parking. So there'll be from the front, there'll be the front of plot cycle parking in these small stores. There'll be an open visitor hoop next to the house, and then at the back they'll also be able to accommodate additional bikes if they want them in more secure setback positions. So we've kind of taken that similar approach across the site, like I say, and they're kind of provided in accessible locations. In terms of car parking, so residential car parking is provided for all of the homes on the site, and they're covered in the blue areas on the plans. Car parking follows the design guide and is positioned to minimise impact on the street. So it's typically located on plot, and I've just put some examples from the design and access statement of example where garages are introduced but kind of set in the street scene. There'll be approximately 46 visitor spaces that will be provided on and around the development. The spaces that are provided on the streets will not be marked out. As such, there will kind of be flexibility on street parking where it's safe to do so. So in terms of the key open spaces on the site, so it follows some of the principles set in the code and also the requirements of Section 106. So there'll be a variety of landscape edges that form the boundary of the site. So we've got and also the parks in the centre. So we've got the neighbourhood play park on the left-hand side of the screen. We've got another neighbourhood park to the right. And then we've got the Ridgeway, which is the main artery between Tevish Drift and the secondary school along to the north of that boundary there. In between, we've also got some of the smaller pocket parks that you can see highlighted in green, where there will be some informal play and landscaping, biodiverse landscaping as well. So in total, the area of public open space is about 1.4 hectares. So just zooming in on some of these key open spaces. So the formal park here includes a leap play area, which will provide the neighbourhood play level of provision. The park will be enclosed by formal hedgerows, which are around the edge. And there'll be two main entrances for children to get in and out. It's proposed that these will be hydraulic self-closing gates as well to safeguard, for safeguarding reasons. The hedgerows around the edge will be maintained to about 1 metre high, and the surrounding, there'll be pockets of trees that will have clear canopies to 2.1 metres, ensuring the play area can still be clearly overlooked by the houses that surround it. The play provision on the site, this is the concept plan that was submitted with the application, and they've got details here of potential pyramid play facilities, table tennis, but the specific details of each of the equipment will be considered when we get to planning condition, which has been recommended, and we'll be working with local community groups to help inform the type of equipment that's put in. So this is just a CGI that I thought was quite helpful. So this is looking on to, if you can see the plan in the bottom left-hand corner there, just shows the aspect it's looking on to. So we're looking onto the park here. We've got the low hedges and the trees dotted around. And then you can see the houses that surround it. So it will hopefully be quite a safe environment for children to play in. So in terms of the other neighbourhood park, the more linear park on the other side, this is going to be a bit more of an informal space. There'll be parkland features. We've got a community orchard in this space, which will be full of fruit trees. There's certain trees that because of safeguarding, we can't have, but the only ones we can do are, at the moment, is the apple and pear varieties. This will all be set within other biodiverse planting to promote, a pollinating corridor. The space will also feature some elements of play and public art as well, which have been indicatively located on the plans for that detail to be worked through in the condition and the public art strategy. This is just another CGI, which is looking from East Park, which was approved in the infrastructure application, kind of just is not quite capturing the linear park, but just on the edge, you can kind of see the scheme tape shape. This is just a CGI of the Ridgeway, which, like I said, is the linear kind of cycle route between Tevish Drift and the secondary school. As you can see, that they'll be segregated, so the cycleway will be to the top. It will be defined in a slightly different colour, and then the footway to the south, with the natural landscape and biodiverse features in between. And then we come to the small pocket parks. So the pocket parks will be scattered around the phase. A few of them will include the rain gardens as well as a SUDS feature, and there'll be some informal kind of play around here. These aren't meant to be laps or leaps, but yeah, just kind of a feature to soften the public realm. Just going on more to the building design, so scale and massing. The proposed blocks have small footprints and are highly permeable. This creates good design through focal points and memorable buildings. Height and massing plays a role in this, with the taller buildings being located on the important corners. So you can see the primary route going from the Cherry Hinton Road through the site. And the higher buildings, which will be the red ones, will be the 4-storey, and then it will cascade down. So the village, the East Village, which is just to the south of this plan, is approximately 35 dwellings per hectare. And then the Gateway, which is meant to be quite a bit higher density, will be about 50 dwellings per hectare. So the scale and massing is in accordance with the parameter plan that was approved, which you can see down here. So in terms of tenure type and adoption, so the proposal includes 141 affordable homes, which is 40% of the overall amount, which is in line with the detailed security outline. The split of them homes is 70% will be affordable rent and 30% will be shared ownership. So the affordable rent's in the yellow and the shared ownership's in the pink. And all of the affordable units will meet or exceed the space standards. And there'll be 8 of the units will be wheelchair user dwellings under M43 as required by the outline. In terms of the market units, there'll be 210 market units and will provide a housing mix. Again, the homes will meet or exceed space standards. There was a requirement on the outline for custom and self-build dwellings, just generally across the site. And we've been developing that with the developers separately, and we expect that tenure type to come forward in the next reserve matters application, so there won't be any specifically on this phase. In terms of adoption, I've put this plan up, so the areas in pink are the areas we hope will be adopted by the Highway Authority. The areas in yellow will be provided by the management company, so we've tried to reduce those that to the management company as least as we could. In terms of housing typologies, so like I say, they'll all meet the accessible homes, M42, but there'll be a small proportion that will be adaptable on the coach and mews houses that we secured in the Section 73 application. So here we've got a range of terraced and family homes, coach house on the Mews Street, semi-detached and detached homes. The house types include 3 different roof variations. So we've got the parapets, gables and dormers. The majority probably will be the parapet roof forms. The variations have been grouped in short terraces, and each of the terraced houses on the ground floor will have a bay window. So the houses are long. So this is just an example of one aspect of the scheme. So these houses look out onto the Ridgeway, so they will have kind of the bay windows facing out. Some of the housing types will have the upper floor terrace as well. So we've got the pergolas that were recommended by Quality Panel. And we also expect some details of kind of climbing planters to come up through there to create some shade. In terms of sustainability, all of the proposed homes will be highly sustainable. So they'll be providing over 65% energy reduction on Part L of the building regulations. All the homes will be gas-free. There'll be clean energy provided by the air source heat pumps, which will be attached to the buildings, and a condition has been added to agree the detailed spec of them. The homes will provide high levels of daylight, sunlight and ventilation. So like I said, 94% of the homes across the site are dual aspect. And that's quite a high figure considering there's a good proportion of apartments and flats across the development. So that's about, 21 out of the 351 homes would be dual aspect. Every home has access to a private outdoor amenity space, a balcony or a roof terrace, and kind of adding to their amenity. So just a quick overview on materials. We've recently been out on site with the developer already, looking at some sample panels for the bricks. We've followed the material palette that we detailed in the design code. A weatherboarding is proposed on this face in the village area, where the density is meant to be a lot lower and a bit more of an agricultural feel has been taken, whereas the gateway we don't see any of that material because it's a bit more of a contemporary feel. We're also looking at the patterning of the bricks as well to add some texture across the site. Like I say, that them details will be conditioned. It's giving you an example. I won't go through all of the apartments, but I'm just giving you an example, and this concept has been taken on across all of the apartment buildings on the site. So if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, this one just relates to the two that face Airport Way and East Park. These are the slightly bigger apartments. So we've kind of approached this in a way that kind of it helps to split up the massing and bulk of the apartments. So all of the blocks will be a mix of two beds and one beds. There'll be minimal common parts. We don't have any any long corridors or anything. And we've tried to give people their own front door and on street to the street or their garden. So parking is provided one-to-one and located behind the frontage. And I'll show you a 3D model which you can see in a bit more detail how it will build up. And there's a deck that supports columns, which we can plant some climbing planting. Secure bike parking has been located within the building. So this is your ground floor plan, but you can see the parking areas. We've got the main entrance here, and we've got the parking access to the rear. And the bin stores are incorporated in them areas as well. This is just an axiometric plan, which is kind of built up the detailed plans, but in a 3D model. You can see here, this is the apartment building. So from externally from the footpath, it will hopefully just look like it's broken up rather than one large block. We've got the gable ends. You can see that so the cars will come down the road here, and then underneath these houses we'll have, there'll be an access and they'll park on the floor, and then there'll be a decked access up to some of the masonettes along here. And this is just another view from the decked access. So just beyond these bars down here is the car parking area, and these are some of the masonettes which will have their own accesses from wherever they decide to access the building. So just in conclusion and summary, so the application was submitted by Bellway Latimer for the approval of the reserve matters pursuant to the outline permission for the first phase of residential housing. The proposals represent kind of accumulation of pre-application consultation with all of our technical officers. The applicants have also done a range of public consultation events with different groups in the community and the local parish council. Officers consider the ambition and proposals reflect our aim in providing a high quality development and would align with the design code. We therefore have recommended the application for approval. These are just a draft set, you can't really see them on the screen, of conditions that were put in the back of the pack, just if we need to refer to them, and yeah, over there.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for your report. The product of a lot of hard work, so thank you for that. So before I turn to the public, can I just remind you, you've got 3 minutes, and the committee manager will advise you when you've reached that 3 minutes. So it's David Fletcher of Stratton Parker. So if you'd just like to come and you're in the hot seat. And so if you just introduce yourself, and you've got 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, David Fletcher from Stratton Parker, and great to be back at Joint Development Control Committee. Following up, it was only 3 weeks or so ago we were here for the infrastructure application. As you've heard from your officer, the proposals before you today have been as a result of a collaborative and positive process that we've been through with both your planning officers and a range of consultees. This followed both prior to and following the submission of the application. The application has sought to closely follow the vision and objectives set within the design code for the site, and apologies for mentioning this again as I did last time, which has been put forward for a National Design Award. We have maintained exactly the same design team on this Reserve Matters application that was involved in the development of the design code. And I'd like to just read out a very short extract from the Urban Design Officer's response on the application. They said as follows: "There are many great aspects of the proposal that successfully and thoughtfully translate the design code. This first residential parcel has the potential to create a memorable, high quality and well-designed place with streets and spaces that prioritise people, create conditions for social interaction and support active lifestyles. This was exactly the vision we were aiming to create for this site." In addition, as you've heard from your officer, this first phase will facilitate the delivery of key play spaces and open space within the development following the principles of living infrastructure. We will also provide a green link, the Ridgeway between Teversham Drift and the proposed secondary school, which will come forward in the future. Energy reduction, efficiency and ventilation were all integral design considerations from the outset. As you've heard from your officer, we will achieve a 65% energy reduction against Part L, and all dwellings will have air source heat pumps. We believe we're one of the very first developments of this scale to achieve that. We have sought to maximise dual aspect of housing, and just picking up on a comment from one of your councillors earlier, this was very much integral into the design. Although I thought we've done the modelling, we very much led it as a design-led, and the minimal number of apartments that haven't got dual aspects have been developed with shallow pan widths and wide frontages, none of which are north-facing, to ensure good daylight and sunlight ventilation. Cycle parking has been conveniently located, and again I think we took on board comments from JDCC when we presented on the design code almost a year ago to really improve that aspects, and all dwellings have got access to an EV charging point. As you've heard, in terms of adoption, we've really minimised the areas that would go into a private management company to keep charges very low. And if approved at committee today, the applicants are excited to implement this first phase of the development, which we believe will set the standard for future phases that come forward on this site. Thank you.
Well, you went over by 3 seconds, so I think we'll allow you that. Thank you so much for your presentation. So we now move on to member questions. So I'd like to take bids. Councillor Poor is first out the box. Councillor Thornborough. I'm going this side this time because I've indulged the South Cambs Brigade. I don't know, why do you all sit so separate? Why do you sit separately? We're all joint. Okay, I'm right. Councillor Stobart, Garvey. You always come in last, Councillor. I'm going to put you down. I know you do. Oh, you can't resist it. Okay. Thank you. So, Councillor Pora, please. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of quick questions. Would officers accept for informative for the same as we did previously to add that letterboxes should be accessible for flatted developments, as we did for the previous one? I could cross that off for Councillor Levine then. For the single aspect, and I note that it is good that they're, considering the number of flats, it is very low. Do we have mechanical heat recovery systems or anything in there, or are we relying entirely on the design? Though I do note they're not north-facing. Thirdly, future planting. Obviously, as and when the airport ceases to be an airport, I think we did in one of the previous JDCCs recently, or might have been planning, we actually had a condition that allowed different fruiting trees to be put forward in future. So just wanted to check the officers were satisfied that the landscaping conditions allow that and any monetary contribution is being sought. As I raised in the last one, are we happy that we've got any kind of fair management fee? I do note and welcome the move to have a lot of the affordable housing on the adopted roads. I think that's really important. But as I mentioned before, we've got private buyers as well. We don't want high charges or unjustifiably high charges. Car club spaces, I'm just repeating my questions from earlier, I apologise, but yeah, it's not mentioned. I thought with this design code there were going to be quite a few. It may be that they're not in this part of the site, but could the officer just confirm? And also, would you accept the same informative that new people moving in get some information about the car club? So that's something that might avoid car purchasing. And finally, garden sizes. Could the officer just confirm that you're satisfied that particularly for any larger houses and 2 or 3 bedroom places that the gardens will be sufficient? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pora. I'll let Philippa in a bit answer the question about the informative, just because I didn't hear that on the last one, so I'll let her cover that. In terms of the mechanical heat recovery in the non-dual aspect apartments, there definitely will be in any ones that face Airport Way because we've got the noise issues from there. I think there would be, but I'm not 100% sure. So, yeah, I think that's what's being proposed. But yeah, a lot of the apartments anyway are facing Airport Way, so they'll need something like that to mitigate the noise. In terms of the fruit trees, so yeah, like you said, at the moment, because of safeguarding, we've only been able to introduce apples and pears. We've got the management plan that we'll secure via the planning condition, similar to what we did on the reserve matters, and we'll kind of develop that so when the airport does move away, the developer has committed to potentially putting in some more, but we just can't secure a monetary contribution at this stage. So. In terms of the cost of adoptable and non-adoptable streets, yeah, like I say, we've tried to kind of to adopt as many of the streets as possible. I think for placemaking, there's been corners which result in streets that aren't adopted because they only serve a few houses. But yeah, I understand your points on that. Car clubs, so in the outline application, a number of car club spaces were secured. I think there was only three or four spaces that were secured on this whole site. A few of them will be located in the local centre, and then a couple of will be located on another phase. So we've got a site-wide strategy for that, but they're focused on more the high-density kind of aspects of the scheme, which are in other phases. In terms of garden spaces, because this is a lower density part of the site, the gardens are a really good size, so we're comfortable that they meet all the standards. There's not any there that kind of raises concern with us.
This is the landscape plans actually showed the hedgehog doorway, so that's a big tick.
Yeah.
Does the landscaping allow for any particular use for older children? I didn't see any sort of basketball nets or skateboarding. So again, could there be skateboarding friendly landscape incorporated?
Yeah.
Shall I go through all
Yeah,
my
keep
questions?
going. Yeah.
I noticed seemed to be a landscape buffer to Cherry Hinton Road. Is that controlled at all, or is it just sort of left to be a wild area? I think it's outside the red line boundary. This scheme achieves so much as far as energy efficiency, so much that the 21 single aspect homes is really disappointing. And I'd like to know where those homes are. Are they amongst the market homes and affordable homes, or are they all affordable homes? Have they actually been designed to mitigate overheating? Do they have external shutters with ventilation? Do they have an overhangs or anything like that? I'd like to know more about these single aspect homes and what they look like. Thank you. And where they are. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thornbury. So in terms of children's play provision, so the last committee, we considered the infrastructure application, which was the main open spaces on the site. Some of them open spaces included potential provision for one of them BMX kind of bumper kind of tracks to the northern boundary of the site. And we've also kind of got the wider trim trail that goes round as well. So we're kind of looking at the site as a whole. We've definitely got areas for that type of provision on the site. In the neighbourhood park that we've got in this phase, I'll see if I can just find my plan as well. There's kind of provision there for potential equipment like, wrong one, sorry. For like table tennis. We also could look at other types of equipment that older children might want to see, and we'll go through the kind of community engagement process to kind of get specific details of that. So yeah, hopefully that will start to go through. And we've got the wider play strategy that really helps to kind of make sure we're accommodating for different age ranges. There's a set of criteria that the developer has to meet and seasonality. So that really helps us to make sure we can get that type of equipment in. In terms of the landscape buffer, so the application we considered before the last committee was for the infrastructure, which I'm just seeing if I can. This one's probably the best. Sorry. So this plan is the kind of the framework plan for the whole site. So you can see this big green area that fronts onto Cherry Hinton Road and Airport Way. That was part of the infrastructure application. So that will that's approved kind of like a linear park. It will have big attenuation features and places to walk. So that will provide the buffer with the RMA3 houses along there. In terms of energy efficiency, so the 21 single aspect homes will be within the apartment buildings. And if I go... If I just get the example of the apartment block up again. So the main ones that you can see that won't be single aspect are some of the first floor. Can you see my cursor there? So they're just split up in kind of blocks, but the main few that you can see that won't be dual aspect are the ones on the corner of the blocks. And yeah, it's kind of... I know that the architects have worked as much as they can to design this out, but there are a few on each of the blocks that haven't been able to have that dual aspect included. So this is an example of one of the apartment blocks, but obviously this is kind of a similar situation on the other apartment blocks as well. Seeing if I'll go in, try and see if I can go in a bit further into the floor plan so you can see how these have been laid out. Yes, so this is kind of one of the floor plans where you can see that it's not, it hasn't got the dual aspect, but they'll still kind of have access to a terrace or a balcony area. Like the agent said, they won't be north facing, and I think they're likely to have kind of mechanical ventilation anyway because of being near kind of the noisier roads. Yeah, I hope that in part answers your question.
Through you, Chair, are they all affordable homes?
So there's a mixture. So some apartment blocks are affordable, some are market. I just show you the 10-year plan. So you can see the affordable ones will be in the yellow. So we've got 1R, which is up here, and 5B, which will be the affordable apartments. We've got an apartment block which is in pink, which is the shared ownerships. And then we've also got market ones as well, which is 1P and 5C, which will be the market. So they're kind of very evenly kind of distributed. It's not just the affordable that will be in them. So.
Councillor Levine, please.
Thank you, Chair. Really pleased to hear that there will be some bicycle boxes. It's something that I think should be in all future builds in Cambridge, just to get that out there and minuted, please. If I understand it rightly, the individual houses will have individual lockable boxes, sealed boxes, nice big boxes you can put a bicycle in and you can lock it, because bicycle theft is a serious problem in Cambridge these days. And I think you said in the apartment blocks would have internal storage for bicycles. They all have internal storage for bicycles. That's really good to hear. Like I say, bicycle theft is really a serious problem. External mailboxes covered. EV charging, a public speaker mentioned it, but I didn't catch everything that he said. So I'd like to know that there's a plentiful supply of EV chargers, and I'm sure Councillor Gawthorpe would probably also, and me, would ask for some high current chargers available as well, provided the electrical supply is up to it. So those basically my comment on the bicycle boxes and a question on the EV charging. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in terms of EV charging, they'll be located on all of the plots. Will have EV charging points. Some of the off-street parking bays will also have the charging points on them. There just won't be any in the adopted highway because they're not adoptable at the moment. But yeah, all of the spaces will have EV charging. In terms of the level of charging, I think they're not the rapid ones. We've seen them in the local. We have seen them already in the infrastructure application in the local centre. There'll be split provision, but for the homes themselves, they'll have the other provisions. So. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chair. So just a few questions really about sustainability and comment about overheating. So first of all, I was just trying to track down the solar PV fit for this development. And perhaps I could just add a supplement. It's quite common on new developments to have the solar panels mounted, as it were, on roof rather than in roof. In roof has certain design appeal to it because it produces a smooth kind of roof line. So I was interested in that. There's a comment on I think the possibility, so in the show homes, you'll be able to investigate how you can add solar panels. It is very cost effective, but that kind of poses the question, or leads you to the question of how is the accommodation made? And could that, again, could those new solar panels, those additional solar panels be fitted in roof as opposed to on roof? So that's the solar panels. EV chargers, yes, are mentioned, and I guess because, and again, because these are conventional houses in the sense of having single phase supplies, there would be 7 kilowatt units, so a regular kind of EV charging. So if I could just make a comment about overheating, the emerging wisdom suggests that overheating is obviously helped by dual aspect and other means, but it's also assisted by good kind of practice in the house. So if you don't have dual aspect, you can go a certain way through the way you manage the house during hot days. So is the absence of dual aspect actually posing a question for the developers as to how they would assist homeowners to manage a house in those hot conditions? And then just one final thing. We did have that debate a long time ago about the connection of this development into, if you will, the town, the station, and so on. So I'd just like to note, I know it's not within the scope of our discussion today, but I would just like to note that those external connections are still, in a sense, needed to make some of these excellent provisions for cycling actually work in the broader kind of context of Cambridge. So, Chair, thank you for the opportunity to raise those questions.
That's fine, yeah. So in terms of solar PVs, so we haven't got any, so the wider sustainability strategy that was agreed at outline lent more towards the use of the air source heat pumps. So at the moment, the application isn't proposing any solar PVs being installed. There's a condition on the outline for a show home, and we would expect PVs to be offered to residents as an add-on if they wanted to purchase them. It means that they won't be able to be installed, I guess in the permissions, they won't be able to be installed in the roof, but I guess they would be on the roof. We're looking for the self and custom build units, which hopefully will come forward in the next phase. We're kind of looking at a package of details, one aspect being solar panels being installed within the roof form that customers can choose, or future occupiers can choose if they want, and the scheme being kind of designed around that. So yeah, that's something we're thinking about, but certainly on this scheme, there's not any proposed in the plans at the moment, if that makes sense. In terms of the EV charging, I think, yeah, you're correct there. I think it's, yeah, kind of I don't know the different levels, but it's not the rapid ones, it's the standard ones in terms of that are being fitted to the houses to charge the cars. So. In terms of overheating and dual aspect, I guess that's probably one more for the developer. I'm not quite sure on their approach to how they're going to. I expect that they'll have to, with the air source heat pumps as well, there'll have to be kind of an information package to the future residents to know how to use the equipment and how to control the heat in their homes. So I can't fully answer that one for you at this stage. In terms of connecting to the wider area, so I'll just put up the master plan framework again, which kind of shows the site and context. So this is kind of based on the parameter plan. So we've got the Ridgeway, which is kind of was to the northwestern boundary. There was an important route that's dotted on this plan that would connect the secondary school down to Cherry Hinton itself. We've kept that provision in there, and that will provide kind of a direct cycle link between the two that's completely off-road. So it'll be safe for all users. And then you can see here we've got the primary route, which kind of connects Cherry Hinton Road with Airport Way, with all the relevant cycle infrastructure. So residents will be able to access other parts of the city and connect down to this Reserve Matters parcel here in the purple. So, yeah.
Yes.
Just very briefly, and I'm sorry I didn't mention this the first time around, but this is the first Reserved Matters application under the design code. Maybe the infrastructure Reserved Matters was. And I don't think it's more to register an interest at this point, but it'd be great to know how the design code supported the development of this Reserved Matters application, or really how you approached the analysing the application. Maybe that experience will accrue with subsequent applications. So not for answering now, Chair, but I think we should note it for the future.
So, Councillor Garvey.
I just wonder whether the cycleway could have lights as well for people in the winter. And also, I was just trying to work out that if you were visiting in a car a friend who lived on the estate, where you park the car, whereas perhaps previously you might have parked outside the house, but I just wonder where that would be. And the third thing I wanted to say is pocket parks. It'd be quite nice if there was sort of benches around, just to make them more friendly for spaces.
Yeah, so in terms of lights along the cycleway, I think that's certainly something that will need to be installed, and there'll be quite a few residents around here. I think along some of the key ones, there might be kind of slightly bigger lights that you can easily see your way. Maybe along the ridgeway that runs kind of to the northwest, we might be looking at kind of lower level, maybe bollard lighting or lights in the path itself. Just to try and keep the area a bit more darker and a bit more tranquil. But there's a lighting condition that will need to be discharged. So we can, follow that detail to make sure the right ones are installed. In terms of visitor spaces across the site, I just put the parking plan up here. So the main visitor spaces will be on street, so they won't be marked on, if that makes sense. People will be able to just park where safe to do so at the time that they're visiting, and I guess it will just be on demand. And and then all the allocated spaces will mainly be on plots, so people that park from their houses will be on plots. So that's kind of how we've approached that. And then the pocket parks. So this is just a concept plan of a pocket park. In the landscape condition, we are going to look at kind of details of bins and benches. And some of the spaces that are close to some of the apartment buildings, we probably wouldn't put benches in because they're just close to where people were, their rooms and flats. But certainly in some of the more, the pocket parks that are separated from those places, we'll definitely look to install them features. And I think there's a section drawing here that just shows some potential options that we can look at.
In passing on the question of the Ridgeway lighting, we have two forms of Eddington, one lit, one unlit, and it's got stud lighting in along the boundaries of the pathway, and it just doesn't work. So it's particularly a problem with pedestrians because they don't have front and rear lights normally, pedestrians. Yeah. I'd sort of say steer you towards getting them steer properly lit. Okay, so Councillor Khan, please, and then I've got Councillor Fane, thank you. Last but not least. Okay.
It's more of a comment, really, in the light of what Councillor Stobart said about ventilation. My wife is Polish. I lived 9 years in Poland, in a house in Poland, where the climate is more continental, but perhaps more like we will have in the years in the future. And houses there have a ventilation shaft going from through the house to the roof. So that you have a secondary ventilation, you get through ventilation. That's normal there. And it clearly helps because if the vent is at the top of the room, hot air rises and then is passed up out the top of the house. I don't know whether this is included, but it might be something that we should be considering in future as a routine in housing to do. The one comment I would make from experience is that you do have to have some control because in winter you tend to get a cold downdraft coming down the shaft. So you have to have some sort of control of it. But it works quite well otherwise. Just a comment.
Thank you very much. I think that pioneering scheme at Beddington in South London had the fans on the roof as part of a natural ventilation system. And that hasn't been widely adopted. So thank you for drawing our attention to that. It's a useful reminder. So, Councillor Fane, you're not last actually. It's going to be between these two in a moment, but you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry to add my name to the list at this stage. Rebecca Ward referred to the inclusion of certain sustainability features within the show home. I just wanted a clarification on this. If this were in South Cambs, I think there would be a sustainability show home required in addition. But because this is city, it's not. But then most of the features that would for instance, have been in the sustainability show home in, let's say, Trumpeted Meadows or whatever, are already incorporated here, with the obvious exception of solar, where it's just the orientation has been lined up ready for that at some stage in the future. Have I got that right?
That's right. So because this was a cross-boundary site, we had to outline, we had to consider the city council policies and South Cams. So there is a sustainable show home condition that's on the outline that the developer will need to discharge. So yeah, we would expect a certain level of detail coming forward with that, and that includes the option to buy solar panels if the customer wishes. So, yeah.
Councillor Carling.
Thank you. This may have been discussed at outline stage, but I can't quite remember, so I think it's important to bring it up, which is just the concept of bus stops. And I'm wondering what provision there is for bus stops essentially throughout the site, and not just kind of poles, but also, you know, seating and covers essentially, so that it's just a bit better for people to wait at, especially people who have mobility issues. So I just wondering if you could tell me a bit about that. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I might ask John to help me a bit in the background, but I'll give it a go first. So in terms of the bus route, the main bus route will go, I'm just gonna, will probably go along the primary street. So you'll enter from it will enter from Cherry Hinton Road and Airport Way and kind of go through the site, and it will also go around the secondary street. And the buses aren't proposed to go through this residential phase. So the routes off the primary route won't accommodate the bus, so people will have to go to the main routes to get on it. John, I just wanted to get some clarification that that's your understanding as well.
Yeah, sorry, I'm swinging myself around. Yeah, they say, as you say, Rebecca, the main route will be the bus route. Obviously, as we've got cycle routes on both sides, there's effectively floating bus stops, so you don't get a conflict between the pedestrians and cyclists while pedestrians are waiting. And I think, if I remember correctly, again, you may have to correct me on this one, Rebecca, they're all within 400 metres of a dwelling. I think that's not as the crow flies, that's actually as you walk. Because obviously the circle is useful rather than wiggling through the streets.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't have a detailed plan up here, but the infrastructure application showed the positions of the floating bus stops along the route, along there, so that will be a provision.
Thank you for drawing our attention to that. We don't actually ask questions about bus stops. I think that was the first time you've asked them at the committee this year. But that is a key thing, given what we're going to do potentially. 400 metres to the nearest bus stop is a remarkable standard. That's really good. So that was good to draw out. Thank you for that, Councillor Carling. Councillor Gorthwaite-Wood.
Well, after that, this is just to check. There is a landscape management plan in place, isn't there, for the whole site?
Shall I answer now? Or have you got any more questions, or shall I just answer that one?
Well, that's the first one. The other one really is about the single aspect housing and the estimation of overheating. You mentioned the DNO modelling, so that was presumably applied to all the housing, including the single aspect flats. That's correct, is it? And we've talked a bit about trying to mitigate overheating. And obviously some are going to be facing one way, some are going to be facing another. I still have some concerns about that. I wonder if you could comment on that. Thanks again.
So in terms of the landscape management plan, we'll condition them in the application. There's some draft conditions there, and we'll kind of align that with the safeguarding requirements from the airport as well. So yeah, there will be a robust management plan in place, and most of the green spaces will be adopted by the city as well. So we'll make sure it aligns with the city council adoption of management and maintenance arrangements too.
Could I come back on that? Because there was a comment I noticed where the landscape officer didn't think that some of the suggested planting was appropriate, which raised that, you know, highlighted that with me. But okay, it sounds as though that's been dealt with.
Yeah, we're going to, because there were some aspects of the landscape scheme that wasn't quite to what we wanted it at this stage, we've conditioned further details to be submitted just to make sure that we are securing the right types of planting.
And then my other concern is on the flats, the apartment blocks, the ability to put in solar panels, especially where they're social, or part-owned, and private, where they're a mixture. There may be difficulties there. Now, the privately owned ones, they're presumably leasehold, are they? Yeah, I don't know how you get over that, but it's something that comes up. Thank you.
Councillor Thornborough wants to answer that question.
Yes, there is a scheme. I know a block of flats where they're doing that now. They're putting in solar panels with batteries so that all 6 flats benefit from the power generated, and it's very energy efficient because they're using different appliances at different times, but rather than just benefiting the communal areas, the individual flats are benefiting. And so it's used in Northern Europe a lot, and it's coming here and people are retrofitting, and so this is something we should really be expecting now on in flats. Can I come back on one other point? Sorry. So we have a sustainable construction supplementary planning document, which does refer to overheating, and we have a hierarchy about how to deal with overheating. And the top is, as Councillor Khan says, it's passive design is meant to be the top aspect of dealing with overheating, which is natural ventilation, allowing low-level fresh air to come in and then use a stack effect for natural ventilation. So, and I raised this with Devonshire Gardens in one of the earlier design stage, and they incorporated that in some of their single aspect homes as a way to compensate. So I think we should be asking in future how they're dealing with the cooling hierarchy. Thank you.
Just got a couple of comments. The first is that this very welcome development of installing air source heat pumps across an entire scheme, it is commendable. There's one point that is kind of just like advice, which is that there's very few people, companies that are providing servicing and advice to consumers. And it may be helpful in your marketing to be able to put together a collective service advisory purchasing scheme, because the supply side is very limited, and it might enable your purchasers and your affordable housing partner to be able to get a better quality service at a cheaper price for the householders. Operating an air source heat pump is quite complicated, and perhaps people will need some induction in how to manage it as effectively as possible. And we revisit the question of the service charges and designing out those costs as much as possible, but also the question of governance. And I'd like to think that Bellway would think about doing something innovative around those governance arrangements, because again, it would give you some competitive advantage, I think, and edge in the marketplace. I think it was well worth considering. You will have noticed that we have not been addressing the fundamental issues with this application, because it's been informed by, as you mentioned, a design code which has been submitted as for competition, and therefore the details. I hope that you've been able to listen to those details. A lot of those are about what we do in the next phases, and what we've And I think if you were here earlier when we were talking about BDW and the Darwin Green development, how a lot of learning has accumulated throughout the whole process, and each phase has been slightly improved on the previous one. There was one single message that came back from today, and actually most meetings, is we really do have strong reservations about single aspect dwellings. This is all about livability, and it just doesn't float our boats, basically. Okay, so does anybody want to make sort of any general comments about the scheme in the round? Not an opportunity to come back and go from into minutiae, just big picture stuff. Does anybody want to say anything?
Definitely echo what you're saying about the air source heat pumps. I think there's a lot to be very positive about in this scheme, single aspect dwellings. But nonetheless, they were still reduced to only 6%, which is still impressive. And just I think Philip was going to follow up my 2 informative requests, but you'll pick that up later, will you? Thank you.
Turning to Philippa to read out the recommendations.
Oh, thank you, Chair. If I may, could I just do a quick summary? I know I didn't.
Well, you can, that's a pre.
If I may take the opportunity, because there are a couple of quite valid points raised that I just do want to pick up on. Obviously, we've heard today that a lot of work's gone into this scheme. Officers have worked really hard on this scheme alongside the developer team. We're satisfied that we've reached an acceptable design solution, but I do hear the comments that have been made, in particular in respect to sustainability matters, single aspect units. The developers are here today. I'm sure they're taking note of the comments that have been made, and it's an opportunity for them to think about these issues on subsequent schemes as they bring them forward. I'm also mindful that technology changes all the time, and again, we'd expect the developers to be ahead of the curve with this and be looking at the new technologies and looking at how potentially it could be assimilated into subsequent schemes as well. I wanted to pick up on the point about the aspirations of the design code, because I thought that was a really valid question, and I think it's something that we as officers do need to look at and come back to you in due course about how much these schemes that are coming forward now do meet those wider aspirations that we sought so hard to embed within the design code. So I would be looking to do a little review of this and providing an update to members, and I think we could fold it into a tour of our key sites, which we've got planned for you later on in the year in September. We're hoping to get out on site in a coach and take you to a few of our sites and have a little lessons learned session. So it'd be a really good opportunity to build that into that session. So that's all I wanted to say. Can I move to the recommendation now?
Oh, just hold on. Councillor Thornborough.
So, possible for this site to still consider the underground bins? It just, the previous scheme, I think, just highlighted it is possible, it's being done in Cambridge. This is the first bit of this site, and if they could look at it at all, I think that'd be really good, but it's just a comment rather than...
Noted. Recommendation, please.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. So the recommendation is on the bottom of page 232 of your agenda. So now it's one of these two-stage, two application recommendations because it's a cross-boundary application. So I'm going to deal with each of the applications in turn, starting at 25.1 of your agenda. So this is to approve Planning Commission 220501 REM, subject to the conditions and informatives in the report with updates. There is an amendment to condition 17 to clarify plot references, and there are also two informatives as recommended by members in relation to accessible letterboxes for flats and information for car clubs in the welcome packs.
Unanimous.
And then we move to the approval or refusal of the outline conditions insofar as they relate to the reserve matters applications, and that's as set out on page 233 in that table.
So that's a vote. Approve that. They had all the hands up at
You are
one time or other.
Thank you for pointing that out. There was an amendment to include reference to outline condition 20 in that table as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then we move to 25.3, which is in relation to the other application, which is application reference 220537 REM. And that again is approval of that planning application with the amendment to condition 17, which relates to the plots in respect of removal of PD rights, and the 2 additional informatives as previously referred to.
Can we vote for those both together? So
That's
all
all-
those to approve?
Yes.
Coaching, thank you, I appreciate that.
And then
Unanimous.
Brilliant. And then finally, at paragraph 25.4, you're now approving or refusing the partial discharge of the outline planning conditions in relation to the RMA parcel 3, as set out in the table on page 234, with an amendment to include reference to outline condition 20 over the weekend.
Thank you very much. Approve that.
The getting it through, the business done in time. Very much appreciated for your work today. Thank you. And also for the scheme. As it was pointed out, the product of the design code coming through into reserve matters and very close cooperation, collaboration with the developers and promoters, which has been so helpful that the officers have remarked on it as being some of the best cooperation and collaboration we have with the developers for the shared planning service. So thank you very much. And I trust that you believe that you're getting returns on that investment and time that you share with us, because we certainly think we do from our side. So thank you. When the developers have gone, can we just hang about for a minute? I just want to say a few things, because this is the end of our municipal